Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Have a seat. You are juror number 42, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Before I turn it over to the attorneys for questioning, there are a couple things we have to do, or a couple questions I have. First, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. So if you could just raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
Yes.
All right. I'm just going to check your mic level here. And if you could, that's usually a pretty good distance. We are using COVID precautions, so we have plexiglass between us and plexiglass between you and the attorneys, and they have their own plexiglass in front of them. I'm going to continue to wear my mask since I am the closest one to you. However, if you think it would be easier for you to speak, and if you feel comfortable doing so, you can take the mask off for this part of the examination, just so you know that.
Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you for filling out that questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
It was greatly appreciated because it gives us a lot of information, and you clearly spent a lot of time on it because there's a lot of information that is valuable to us. First of all, everything is true on the questionnaire?
Yes.
All right. Is there any changes or additions to the questionnaire that you would like to put in?
No.
Okay. And it's been months, I know, and so when the attorneys start asking you questions, it might, on reflection, think, yeah, I did have something to change about that or add to that. It's all appropriate. Don't worry about, oh, I'm saying something different. No, it makes sense. Some of the opinions you gave may have evolved, so it's natural for jurors to change what might be in their questionnaire, so don't be concerned if that's the case. And the attorneys are going to walk through probably some of the answers that you gave, so just kind of think if there's anything to add or change. You weren't supposed to read any articles, pay any attention to any media, but since it has been several months since you filled out the questionnaire, have you inadvertently been exposed to any media? You see a headline, or maybe a friend talks to you about what they read in the paper, giving you more information than you want.
I've seen headlines, but I've not read anything.
Okay, and as far as the headlines, do you recall the substance of the headlines?
I recall seeing something about the other officers. I don't even remember what it was at this point.
Okay. So nothing about the substance of it, or
No.
like any court decisions or anything about the parties, personnel, pre-trial stuff?
No.
Okay. And we ask all these questions for a very important reason, and that, I'm sure you've already guessed, is as a juror you have to decide this case just on the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Follow the law as I give it to you. And you have some knowledge about the case beforehand. And that's what the questionnaire tells us. But at the same time, and it might also give you some opinions that you hold, at the same time you have to, as a juror, put those aside and decide this case just on the evidence and which some people say, I just can't do it. I can't unsee what I've seen. I'm just not the type of person who can do that. It's not a character flaw, it's just we're all different. Some people can put it aside, some can. They can kind of compartmentalize that and put it aside and just decide on what they hear in the courtroom. Where do you fall on that? Do you think you could do that?
As well as anyone else can, I believe so.
Okay. And you know yourself better than we do, and so we're looking just for an honest answer. If you think you could do that, great. In fact, the attorneys might press you for a more definitive answer. Can you do that? Or
Yes.
Okay. Did you recognize any witnesses on that list you were given?
I knew one name, but I don't even think it was a very generic name, so I don't think it's the same person. But I just marked one due to the fact that I recognized a name.
And what's the name, if you recall?
Joel Martinez.
Okay. I'm not sure what the role of that person is. Let's say it is that person that you know. Is it a close friendship or
No.
friend of a friend?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, more of a friend of a friend. Okay, in that case, if you realize that it is the same person that you know, are you still able to treat that person like any other witness? Apply the same standards that I gave you yesterday that you'll hear again if you're on the jury. Put them on equal footing.
Yes.
Okay. Now, we did indicate in the questionnaire that trial would be approximately 4 weeks long, starting March 29th. As we've already seen this morning, sometimes there are delays. But we think that's a pretty good guess that we'll start on March 29th and go for 4 weeks. Does that work for you? Or better yet, can you make it work?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions you would have for me before I turn you over to the attorneys?
No.
Okay, and there's one last piece of advice to make. We have a court reporter taking down everything we say. And so it's much easier if we not talk over each other. Jury selection process can be somewhat conversational. And so, like in a normal conversation, you finish each other's sentences, you interject with affirmations or that type of thing. If we could try and not do that, not talk over each other, and I will tell you that the lawyers and I are the worst at that. So we tend to be the big offenders, but we ask that you also try not to talk over each other if possible. And to make sure the record's clear, if you could answer yes or no as opposed to because the court reporter needs to have a good record. Well, the court needs a good record. Okay? Do you have any questions?
No.
All right. As to juror number 42, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Morning, ma'am.
Morning.
Thank you for your patience. I know you were here yesterday for a while and back this morning with a little bit of a delay. So thank you very much for being here. I am going to ask you a series of questions that are kind of general in their nature first, and then I'm going to follow up with some specifics on your questionnaire. Again, we all understand that it's been a couple months since you've read this and nobody's trying to trick you or anything of that nature, okay? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I may say that from time to time. I'm not trying to be rude. It's just, again, to get the record correct. All right?
Okay.
Thanks. So first of all, let's assume you and I were to meet under different circumstances, at a party or some sort of an event. What are a few things you would want me to know about you from that conversation?
I am a genuine person. I look for true friendships.
Do you have any interests, hobbies? Things?
I like to play hockey, hike outside, cook.
Okay. Wonderful. Did you play hockey in school when you were in school?
Yes.
Okay. Now, can you think of in your personal life, whether it be in a professional context or in a familial context or even within your friend group, where you've been called upon to resolve a conflict between two people?
Yes.
Okay. Without giving us any major details about that conflict, how did you go about trying to resolve that conflict?
One specific one I'm thinking was between two people, and I just tried to be a mediator in that situation and help them talk it through.
Okay. Now, you understand that if you were to be selected as a juror on this case, you would be in a room with 11 other people and some conflict about things may come up.
Yes.
Would you expect that to happen?
Yes.
How would you approach that situation if you were in the jury room and two different jurors had a conflict over some piece of information? What would you do?
I would listen to both sides and again try to hear what both people are saying. And I mean, in that situation in the office, I would have to also say my thoughts as well.
Okay, and that's kind of where I was going to go next is, rather than it being two different people, what if it were just you and one of the other jurors who were in conflict over the importance of a particular piece of evidence?
I would be able to give my thoughts as well.
Okay, and are you willing to re-examine your thoughts?
Yes.
Are you willing to listen to the other juror's opinion?
Yes.
And what if it's a situation where there's a whole bunch of jurors that are kind of saying you're wrong? What do you do?
I would think of a different way to go about what I was thinking and express it in maybe a different manner. Maybe they weren't understanding exactly what I was saying.
Okay. But would you simply just give up for the sake of agreement?
No.
Now, can you think of a situation in your personal life where you've been called upon to try to determine who's telling the truth between two sides of the story?
Not necessarily that I can think of
Okay.
right off the bat.
So part of what your job as a juror is, and the court read this instruction yesterday, is to assess the credibility of particular witnesses in the case. How do you think you would go about assessing the credibility of a particular witness?
In this case, it would be whatever is in the courtroom and what is brought forward about that witness,
Okay.
being we have no prior knowledge of who they are.
Okay. So in a situation where, let's say, two witnesses were watching the same set of circumstances, right? It's a car accident. And witness number one says the light was green, and witness number two says the light was red, right? That's assessing the credibility of each witness. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So in that circumstance, you've got two people standing right next to each other or very close to each other, watching the same incident. How do you go about determining which of those two people is telling the truth?
I think it's important to see what else is brought to the table.
Okay. Such as what?
Other evidence, other witnesses that were there,
Okay.
timing.
Okay. All of those things are very reasonable, right? So you would recognize that there are tools you could bring to the table to try to assess the credibility, things other than what they're saying, right?
Yes.
Now, let's take, for example, if you have a piece of evidence that is pretty clear, right? I mean, you can, whether it be a videotape or a fingerprint or whatever the case may be, whatever piece of evidence it is, but it speaks for itself, right? But two people or two witnesses are saying something different about that same thing. How do you assess the credibility there?
When it's fingerprints or video, I think that would be more valid than what someone is saying.
Okay. But if two people are telling you how to interpret that piece of evidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
The meaning of the evidence, in other words, and they have differing opinions as to the meaning of that evidence. How do you assess that?
Again, I think you have to look at other things other than just opinions, and that video would be other things that come into play in that situation.
Okay, good. In your personal life, can you think, or again, professional, familial, whatever, can you think of a situation where you've been 100% convinced of something and then it later turns out you're wrong?
No.
Okay. Can you imagine that happening in life?
Yes.
Let's again take a hypothetical. If you were certainly convinced of something, right? You had formed an opinion, it was a strong opinion, and it later turns out you were wrong. How would you anticipate reacting to something like that?
Admitting to my wrong?
Okay. And how do you apply that later in life?
Maybe evaluate situations more deeply, or
Okay. So one of the rules of law that will apply in this case is that the judge will instruct you on the law if you were to be a juror in this case, right? Could you follow the law even if you thought it was wrong or you disagreed with it?
yes.
So you could read the law, judge the facts of the case, and apply the law even if you thought that the law should be changed.
Yes.
Now, in terms of your role as a prospective juror, it is to be a finder of the facts, is what we call it. You're the judge of the facts. You would be one of 12 people deciding what happened. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And you understand that ultimately it would require a unanimous jury verdict to either convict or acquit Mr. Chauvin. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And if you were to find yourself on either side of the situation, the odd man out, so to speak, or the odd person out, I guess I should say, odd woman out, how would you be the type of person that would dig your heels in and say, I'm not changing my opinion no matter what? Or would you be the person that would simply concede to get this over with rather than continue fighting?
I am the type of person to hold my ground, so I guess it depends on where we're at and where everyone is at in the situation.
Okay.
But I'm not afraid to stand up when others are against me.
Okay. So I'm going to turn again now to your questionnaire and ask you some follow-up questions. Again, we recognize it's been, I guess, at least 2 months since you filled it out. So the first question that you're asked was to ask about what you had heard or what you sort of knew about this case. Do you recall that question generally?
Yes.
All right. And so what you wrote is you wrote about a page of information that you had learned from the news, right? Learned from the news or conversations or things of that nature.
Yes.
Right? Do you watch the news or regularly read the news?
Not anymore.
Well, obviously, but at this point, did you?
Yes.
Okay. At the point you filled out your questionnaire, you did, right?
Yes.
All right. One of the things that you wrote was about remembering that there were 2 autopsies performed in the case.
Yes.
That's what you believed that had happened.
Yes.
Now, one of the things that is very important is only certain evidence is going to come into the courtroom, and that's what you're required to judge the case on, right? But if you have some knowledge from the time before you filled this out, and that information is not presented in this courtroom, are you able to kind of set aside what you may have remembered or may have learned before and focus only on what's in the courtroom?
Yes.
You were asked to state your opinions as to both Mr. Chauvin as well as Mr. Floyd. Do you remember those questions generally?
Yes.
And in terms of your opinion as to Mr. Chauvin, you indicated that it was a somewhat negative response.
Yes.
Okay. And you wrote, the only reason I chose this and not neutral is due to the fact that it went on so long, the knee, in parentheticals. So can you just explain why did that influence your opinion to the more negative of Mr. Chauvin?
I could only watch part of the video, and from what I saw as a human, that did not give me a good impression.
Okay. And it's important for you to understand that you are entitled to have your opinions, right?
Yes.
You as a human being are entitled to have your opinions, and we may or may not disagree on whatever some of your opinions are. You appreciate that?
Yes.
And nobody is asking you to set aside your personal opinions or beliefs here, generally speaking. Do you understand that?
Yes.
However, the concern is that your personal opinions seep into or affect your decision-making process as a jury. Do you understand why we would be concerned about that?
Yes.
Both from the defense as well as from the state of Minnesota. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. And we have to take what you tell us at face value. You understand that?
Yes.
All right. We don't know what you're really thinking or what's in your heart, and that's why, and it's okay for you to embrace your own personal opinions. Okay? So, the fact that you formed that opinion, and that opinion was negative to some degree because of what you saw on the video, and we'll talk about the video in a second, but because of what you saw on the video, you just thought that it was, as a human being, that it was hard to watch.
Yes.
And that it was longer than it needed to be.
Yes.
And that you felt that the defendant made a decision about how to treat this person that was inhumane.
Yes.
Now, the video that we're talking about, I want to make sure, because there are lots of videos that have been released into the public sphere. And the video I want to make sure we're talking about is there was a bystander video, and that bystander video got uploaded to Facebook. It went viral, and the media started paying attention. Is that the video you refer to?
I guess I'm not quite sure, but
Okay.
most likely.
Okay. There are other videos that have been released publicly, like surveillance videos from nearby stores, and there are some body-worn cameras that may have been out from the police officers that may be in the public sphere. Do you recall from what perspective you were watching this video? Would it have been from a bystander, from a police officer, or a security system?
Bystander.
Okay. So we're probably talking about the same video. Did you first come across that video on social media, or did you see it in the news?
Social media.
Okay. And when you saw it, you indicated that you had watched it one time, although I do not think I fully, or finished it fully, is what you said. So were you watching sort of through social media that native, longer form video?
Yes.
Okay. And then in the news, right, there were like little clips from that video that you may have seen?
Possibly.
Or still frame images taken from that video?
Possibly.
Okay. But why do you think it is that you didn't fully finish it?
I just couldn't watch it anymore.
Because you found it to be inhumane, correct?
Yes.
And again, you have a certain set of life experiences, right? Would you agree with me that you're not a police officer?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that you've never been trained in the arrest of an individual?
Yes.
And that there may be information, well, let me ask it this way. Would you be willing to let other information about police procedure, what happens before or after, all of these things potentially affect your decision? Would you allow your decision to be changed if you gathered more information?
What decision? I haven't made a decision yet.
No, I mean your opinion. I apologize.
Yes.
Okay. So you would be willing to keep an open mind, hear all of the evidence, right?
Yes.
You testify, or I keep saying testified. You told me earlier that when you were called upon to resolve this conflict between your two friends or colleagues, that it was important that you listen to both sides.
Yes.
Can you do that here?
Yes.
You were asked in the questionnaire about whether you talked about George Floyd's death with friends and family members, and you wrote, and what opinions you may have expressed, and you wrote confusion, sadness for everyone, and the need for possible police reform. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, conversation happened a lot in the news with friends, family, I think for most people. And I think when there wasn't an answer, we didn't know what was going on. And everyone saw the video and what's going on in the news. There was just a lot of confusion as to why.
Okay. What do you mean by the need for possible police reform?
Just that.
Just that it could be or may not be?
We need police reform.
Right. I mean, Are you open to the possibility that police reform is not needed?
No.
So you do believe that there are some reforms that are needed to be made as a result of this incident?
Yes.
Again, and it's perfectly okay. I'm not, you indicated that you had, in fact, yourself participated in a peaceful BLM protest in Duluth, and you did not carry a sign,
Yes.
and that other people like your cousins, I believe, indicated that they had also participated in some marches.
They were in Minneapolis, yes.
Minneapolis. Okay. Why did you decide to go to that protest?
I just felt it was necessary to show my support.
Okay. Your support for whom?
Others who have been affected by similar situations,
Okay. So not simply this particular case
and this case.
and this case. So again, you have an opinion about this case. You have an opinion about Mr. Chauvin. You have an opinion about the need for police reform. And all of those opinions are you are entitled to those opinions. Can you honestly tell us that you can set aside those strong opinions and judge this case on the facts alone?
Yes.
Now, during the questionnaire, you were also asked some questions there were more statements, and you were asked to judge or rank your agreement on them on a scale of 1 to 5. Do you recall that generally?
I don't remember what the statements were.
Right, but you remember like circling 1 or 2 or 3
Yes.
with a list of various statements. So I want to ask you some follow-up questions on some of those. So the first question reads, discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be. You circled 4 that you somewhat disagreed with that, and you wrote, what media? What did you mean, first and foremost, by the statement, what media? And why would you somewhat disagree with that statement?
I mean, every news station has a different view on it, or you see different things on every news station, whether it's the actual news or it's Instagram or it's Facebook. You just see a wide variety of things, so I don't think there's a general media that you can talk about.
Okay. And why would you disagree with the statement, discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it to be?
Because I guess I just didn't know what media was being talking about.
Okay, that's fair enough. You were asked, the statement reads, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you checked somewhat agree. Why did you check somewhat agree to that statement?
Just with everything that was shown in the world this past year, that's just what I believe at this point.
Okay. Not pointing to any personal experience or any sort of quantitative data, you're just saying, I kind of agree with that.
I have friends who have been mistreated by the police too, and only people of color.
Okay. Okay. The question was presented, I support defunding the Minneapolis Police Department, and you indicated that you had no opinion of that, but you wrote, would need more research, but cannot until after trial. Can you just, I mean, again, I understand that once you filled this questionnaire out, you didn't go start researching, but you have no opinion. Why?
Because I don't know exactly what it means at this point, but as I mentioned before, I do believe in police reform.
Okay. The statement reads, because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, it is not right to second-guess decisions they make while on duty, and you strongly disagreed with that proposition. Why?
Even police officers are human, and humans make mistakes.
Okay. Do you think that there are different levels of police decision-making?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think there are circumstances where a police officer may have time to think through his or her decision, formulate a plan, and then execute that plan?
Yes.
And then there would be certain circumstances where an officer would have to make a very quick decision, right?
Yes.
And sometimes under incredible stress or danger to themselves or others. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Do you think that there is a distinction between those two types of decisions?
Yes.
Do you think one is more fair to question than the other?
Not necessarily.
Okay. So where is there any distinction? So you would say any decision that a police officer makes is should be questioned?
Yes.
You indicated that your mother's uncle used to be a police officer? So your great uncle was a police officer?
Yes.
How well did you know him, or did you know him?
I see him probably once or twice a year.
Okay. Was he a police officer here in the city or elsewhere? You don't need to tell us where, but outstate? Or
Not in Minneapolis.
Okay. In the state of Minnesota?
Yes.
Okay. If you were to, well, let me ask you, did he ever like kind of tell you stories about his career or anything like that?
Yes.
Okay. If you were to be a juror on this case, and if a question of police policy or practice came up, would you take it upon yourself to call your great uncle and ask him questions about what's right, what's wrong?
No.
Okay, just have to ask. You also indicated that your cousin is a nurse. If this case involved medical testimony, would you call your cousin and ask for her opinion as to the medical?
No.
So I skipped one question that I've been asking other jurors at the beginning, kind of a general question. When it's my understanding of the process is that you received just like a page or two letter that tells you that you have jury duty, and then a little bit later you received a packet of information and this questionnaire, and then you received instructions maybe later from there, right? Does that sound like the process as you recall it?
Yes.
So when you got that first letter that told you that you had been summoned for jury duty, what was your initial reaction?
I was surprised.
Why were you surprised?
It's a global case. Everyone got involved, and honestly, I thought older people would be picked,
Okay.
even though that might not be a thing.
So, I mean, I'm talking about just sort of that initial letter before you knew it was for this case. Or did you know in that first letter you were being called?
We
for
knew
this?
in the first letter,
Okay, all right.
I believe.
Because some people are describing that they figured it out when they got this packet. It doesn't matter. So your response was, especially when you learned that it was this case, it was surprised because it was a global case, and you figured that older people would be called as opposed to someone who's in her early adulthood.
Yeah, I just thought, why me?
Okay. And ultimately then in the questionnaire, the questionnaire asks, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? And you check the box yes. And when asking why, it says, I am a recent college grad. I know it sounds cheesy, but I believe everything happens for a reason. I believe that where I am in life, there is a reason I have been called to be here. This case has been global news, and it will take a special someone to be able to put everything aside and be present at the trial. Right? You
Yes.
remember writing that? So I just have so do you feel that you are serving some higher purpose by being involved in this case?
What do you mean by higher purpose?
Well, there are some people who desperately want to get off of a jury, right? And so they'll say just about anything they can say to not have to be on a jury service. And then there are some people who really, really want to be on a jury for whatever reason that may be. And so they'll say pretty much anything they think they have to do to say to get onto the jury, right? And I'm just curious, because you referenced that you're here for some special reason. What would that reason be? Would it be to make sure that Mr. Chauvin is convicted?
No.
What would the reason be?
To have someone here that has an open mind and who is able to be here for the right reason. And I'm just answering these questions honestly, and if I'm chosen, then that's the way it's supposed to be. But if I'm not, then that's the way it's supposed to be.
Okay. Fair enough. May I have a moment, Your Honor? Your Honor, the defense will exercise appropriately.
All right. Juror number 42, you are excused from this panel. You're also excused from your jury service for this term. So unless you get a summons in the years to come, you're free to go about your business. Thank you, though, for taking the time to fill this out. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. I have that as defense number 8. Is that correct?
That's what I have.
We're going to probably take a 15-minute break. I don't know if we have our juror, and even if we do, they have to go through the 15-minute orientation video that is standard. So it'll be at least 15 minutes. So let's circle back at 10 o'clock to see if we're ready to go, because the juror who is missing, who is on their way, is our next juror. So let's be in recess at least until 10 o'clock. Thank you. right, just for the record, we are back on both audio and video. And we are getting the other jurors for the group instructions. All right, you can pick any seat you wish. It's just like church. Everybody takes the back row. That's okay. We want you to be comfortable in this process. Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, can you all hear me? If not, we have hearing assistance devices, and everyone is nodding yes. My name is Pete Cahill, and I'm one of the judges of the district court. You have been summoned as potential jurors in the case of State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. A person charged with a crime has a right to a fair trial before an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure the jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to all prospective jurors, which must be answered under oath. First of all, thank you for filling out and sending back the questionnaire that we sent you. That's a great help to us in knowing a little bit about your background. Your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best served by your continuing to answer those questions fully, completely, and honestly. The questions that you'll hear today will follow up on issues from the questionnaire and possibly other topics. Now, after the questioning is over, the attorneys may excuse you from service on this jury, and I may excuse you for what's called cause. In either case, it does not mean that you are not a fair and impartial person, and you should not take offense in being excused. I also ask that you not take any offense in any questions that are asked. To some extent, we must pry in order to explore opinions you might hold and to talk about some experiences that you have had that might affect your ability to serve in this case. The defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree, but in the normal course of trial, charges are likely to be added or subtracted, but those are the charges for you to consider today when you are hearing the questions. To the charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. And now I'm going to ask the different attorneys and parties to represent, to introduce themselves. So for the state.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steve Slisher, representing the state of Minnesota.
Good morning. My name is Christina Marinakis, and I'm assisting with the prosecution.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Keith Ellison, and I represent the state of Minnesota.
Good morning. Joshua Larson, also with the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson, if you could introduce yourself and your client.
Good morning. My name is Eric Nelson. This is my client, Derek Chauvin, my assistant, Amy Voss.
Thank you. Now, in addition to the attorneys from the Attorney General's office who are here, other attorneys might make their presence known and be a part of the case. Those include Aaron Eldridge, Jerry Blackwell, and possibly and Matthew Frank. Does anyone know any of those attorneys or anybody who works for the Attorney General's office? Okay. And juror number 44, I think we'll deal with that when you come forward for your individual questioning. Remind us that you have to tell us about the specifics. Anyone know anyone from Mr. Nelson's firm or have any association with them? Okay, everyone's shaking their heads no. Anyone acquainted with anyone else in the courtroom? As you look around, no one familiar, all right. Now, you have been given a copy of a list of potential witnesses. During your individual examination, you'll be asked if you know anybody on that list and the nature of the relationship. So keep that in mind and also bring that list with you when you come into the courtroom later on. Now, one of the things the attorneys may not do in jury selection is to instruct you on the law. But I do want you to be aware of some of the basic concepts that apply in all criminal cases so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and the attorney's questions. So I will instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence, and they create no inference of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way permit himself or herself to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made against him or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him, and in order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove his innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial, unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt according to the law and the evidence admitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. Now, if you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given their testimony. There are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect, but in determining believability and weight of testimony, you may take into consideration the witness's interest or lack of interest in the outcome of the case, the relationship to the parties, their ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, their manner, their age and experience, their frankness and sincerity, or the lack thereof, reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in light of all the other evidence in the case. Also, any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury, you should rely in the last analysis upon your own experience, good judgment, and common sense. There are things you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigators. You are not to go out and do any looking, and you are not to ask people about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved, the lawyers, witnesses, or spectators. Do not be offended if the attorneys, parties, or witnesses do not speak to you. They know that it would be improper to contact you except through the normal selection process, and so the attorneys and parties will confine themselves to a brief greeting. Now, during the selection process, your family and friends will be curious as to what you are doing, and you may tell them that you are on a panel of potential jurors in a criminal case, and that is all you should tell them. Since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, during these proceedings, please refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror or to comment on this trial. You may access those social media tools, but please do not publish any information about this case or your thoughts about this case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about the case, and in particular, do not talk at all to anyone involved in it. Because of the nature of the charges, this case is receiving media coverage. Do not read about this case in the newspapers or watch anything online. Do not listen to news about it on radio or television. This trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of you or any juror will be taken at any time, now or during trial if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. In order to protect your privacy, you will only be referred to by your random number. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast, unless we need to discuss something that is deeply personal or extremely sensitive or embarrassing, and I specifically order the audio to not be broadcast. In that case, you will still have to answer questions on the record, but without audio or video broadcast. And with that, the exception of juror number 44, I'm going to direct the remaining jurors to follow the deputy back to the courtroom you were just in, keeping in mind that we are exercising COVID protections. So I took my mask off because we are far away from each other, and so that I could be clear. I'm going to be putting it back on when you are in the witness stand for jury selection. Please, while you're in the courtroom, keep your mask on, maintain social distancing, and feel free to use all the hand sanitizers and wipes that you wish. With that, if you could go to the deputy with the exception of juror number 44. All right, juror 44, if you could come on up to the witness stand again. And just for the record, we had a short discussion off the record, or off audio and video. And just so we are clear, we are currently on audio only. We are aware that there's some matters that we are going to discuss with you where we'll not only go off audio, but take the extra step of excluding spectators from the courtroom so that only the parties, the attorneys, and a technician who controls our audio and video will be present. Just an advisory there. So before I turn it over to the attorneys, a couple things I want to do is, number one, I have to swear you in to make sure that all your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I so swear.
All right. Well, first of all, you filled out a questionnaire. Thank you for doing so. You took great care, it appears, to fill it out accurately, and we appreciate that. Is everything true that's on the questionnaire?
Yes.
All right. Are there any changes or additions to the questionnaire that you feel comfortable at this time bringing to our attention?
Just the one thing that we need to discuss off audio.
Right. Okay. And I also appreciate the fact that you kind of marked it very well on the questionnaire, and so we'll abide by your request. All the parties agree on that. At some point, other than that, the attorneys might ask you a question that prompts another recollection, or you may realize an opinion you may have given in the questionnaire has evolved. Maybe it's changed. It's just want you to know that it is all right. In fact, we hope, if it's an honest answer, is that you give a different answer. Mm-hmm. We don't think anyone is lying to us. It's just that things change. People on reflection realize maybe there was some stuff they should have added. So feel free to offer something, even if it is different from what's in your questionnaire. You were not supposed to read any articles or watch media since you filled out the questionnaire, because the questionnaire itself gave that advisory. But we recognize it's been a couple months. You may have inadvertently been exposed to something, a headline, maybe a friend talked to you about the case, and since we told you don't tell anybody that you're a potential juror, you couldn't exactly stop them. So did anything like that happen to you that you became aware of more information from when you filled out the questionnaire until today? And be it a headline about pretrial matters, the parties, anything about the case?
No, I mean, I don't watch local news that much. And I haven't turned it on all week specifically because I knew this was happening. But last week I remember news coverage of, fences going up or whatever around precincts and around this building and stuff. But other than that, that's been it.
All right, yeah. Okay. And the reason why we ask these questions, I'm sure you know, is everybody who's filled out the questionnaire knows something about the case, various degrees of knowledge. And I think almost everyone has formed certain opinions about the case or the people involved. And the question is whether you can put all that aside, because as a juror, you have to be fair and impartial. Part of what is being fair and impartial is that we are all working off the same knowledge base. So in other words, put aside what you've learned outside the courtroom, put aside your opinions. I know you can't put them out of your mind completely, but just not make them part of the analysis. Decide the case just on the evidence that you hear in the courtroom and base it on the law that I give you at the end of the case. Could you do that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Did you recognize any of the witnesses on that long list?
No.
Okay. We did indicate the length of the trial would be about a month. For example, if you were picked on this jury, you would be on your own. Feel free to do anything you want until March 29th. And we anticipate starting trial with opening statements and evidence on that day.
Okay.
And probably it'll last about, and this is an estimate, about 4 weeks.
Okay.
Can you make that work with your personal life?
Yes.
Okay. Little hesitation there. Is there a concern that you wanted to talk about, or?
I'm a single mom.
Okay.
Got 2 teenage boys, a senior and sophomore in high school.
Okay.
They can stay with their dad. I think the first week is actually spring break for them.
Okay.
And so they can be with their dad. And
All right. You will not be sequestered during the trial itself, unless something happens and I have to order.
Sure.
And that would be my decision. Right now, I don't see any need for that. So you can go home at the end of the day. We might have some long days, so
Yeah.
you might be a little late getting home. But deliberations themselves will be sequestered. You'll be kept together, put up in a hotel until come to a verdict. Can you make that work?
Yes.
All right. And we've had other jurors express similar issues that they are single parents, but with younger children. It sounds like with teenagers,
They're kind of capable on their own. It would just be that sequestered part that I figured during deliberation we would be.
yeah. So
I
they could
just
be
wanted
left
to
on
be
their
honest.
own. Sometimes we hope they make good decisions with their teenage brains, but you can pretty much
Yeah,
leave them.
my 18-year-old is not staying by himself.
Sounds like you've already thought through this process.
Either my mom's there or they're going to their dad's.
It sounds like a good decision. All right. Before I turn it over to the attorneys, anything else, any questions you have for me? All right. With that, before I turn it over to Mr. Nelson, just another advisory is when we are doing this, it can become conversational.
Okay.
And in a typical informal conversation, we'll interject with affirmations or even answering the question before it's finished. Because we need a good record of this, we'd ask that you, as much as you can, try not to talk over each other.
Okay.
And I will acknowledge in saying that the lawyers and I are the worst offenders. So, but if we could all try and get to that position, that would be wonderful. With that, as to juror number 44, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Do you have a brief sidebar?
You may. Sure. All right. I think what we're going to do is Mr. Nelson will ask you some questions first, but we are going to go right into some of the more sensitive things.
Okay.
And at everyone's agreement, we are going to go off the audio. The video will simply be of the seal and things like that, not on any of us, so there won't be any lip reading, not that they could with this. But in any case, we will go off audio completely, and we will ask that spectators...